What's happening, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of the Mr. McMahon watch-along live reaction series I'm doing here. Hopefully you guys like this stuff. I want to switch up the content from just being clips of the show. This is episode 3 of Netflix's Mr. McMahon, and it is called Screwjob. Let's jump right into it. So obviously from the title, we're like expecting Montreal Screwjob stuff, which, I mean, again, we know so much about it. But the episode kicks off with the original Screwjob, what is known as the original Screwjob, Wendy Richter, versus, I believe, Black Spider, the fabulous Moolah's under a mask, and they screwed her out of a belt, and maybe we'll hear about more screw jobbings, or maybe we'll dive deeper into this one that doesn't get talked about nearly as much. So Vince asserts that Wendy Richter was almost like holding the belt hostage. Like when it came time to dropping it, she never wanted to drop it and do business. So that's a part of the narrative we never hear. Yeah, so Vince is like, I didn't care. He's like, I didn't feel bad at all. And then he's like, she just came to the back, nodded her head, walked out, and that was the last I ever seen or heard from Wendy Richter again, which is crazy. And I'm surprised Wendy never got involved in like the wrestling business. I'm surprised Tony Khan hasn't tried to bring her in or something. Incredible. The original screw job, man. So they cover the ending of the trial, the steroid trial that didn't end in the last episode, and Hogan is like, yeah, they're all shocked. You know, I told them that Vince had nothing to do with it, even though the feds wanted me to go and bury him, etc., etc. We all know the story. And then you have Hulk Hogan, who's like, no, I wasn't gonna lie. Vince McMahon never made us take steroids. He never sold us steroids. And then Tony Atlas is like, they asked me to testify too, but I told them no, I was taking steroids way before I met Vince. So he turned a blind eye, etc. We all know. And then Meltzer says, I remember I heard Linda say, oh, it proves we don't have a steroid problem. And maybe he did hear her say that, but show me a quote of that, Meltzer. Because I didn't hear her say that. They didn't show it in the doc or anything. Yeah, clearly they did have a steroid problem. He points out, like, no, the trial proved they do have a steroid problem, but you weren't distributing them, or your husband wasn't like making people take them, which is pretty obvious. And then Meltzer goes, oh, well, Vince is, he's not the bad guy, and he's innocent, and he did not proven guilty, and he's clearly not guilty of anything, but he's not the good guy, he's the bad guy. So then Vince gets behind Lex Luger to replace Hulk Hogan, and clearly Luger's on steroids, and also Bret Hart. I know they're like, oh, he's all natural, and I love Bret. I'm a Canadian, so he's a national treasure and national hero. But I think Bret took a little bit of steroids in his day, for sure. You take a little bit. And so they talk about the new generation. Bret Hart, of course, is the new face of the WWF, along with like Razor, Undertaker, Kevin Nash, HBK. Bret Hart even says, I'm the safe guy. Like, I'm the guy who's not gonna get in any trouble. There's no bullshit with me. Vince McMahon smiles and says, oh, Bret didn't have all that charisma. He had enough charisma, not that much, and a very interesting family. Oh, let me tell you. So they're covering again how, Ted Turner, Eric Bischoff, WCW, now they're going head to head and they're getting even more talent beyond Hulk. We all know this story, Monday Night Wars. And the further this talk goes, the more I'm like, man, it's not nothing new. And if you're an Uber mark, the most interesting parts are all of Vince's parts. And Vince McMahon admits, he's like, ooh, I don't know what was gonna happen when I heard this. They'll put us out of business probably. And pretty crazy. So they go over the Lex Luger situation, how Eric snaked him and how it pissed Vince off. He's saying he had people under handshake deals. How very Tony Khan of him. So Hogan says that he knows how Vince feels about his competition when referring to WCW, and he's like, I knew it was on and it was warfare because Vince wants to destroy his competition and eat it. Yeah, I want to eat it when I'm all done with them. Absorb them. So they're going on about how Eric Bischoff would stooge the results of Raw and try and shit on the show, the Monday Night Wars. I'm intrigued to see how Vince reacts to some of the Monday Night Wars stuff, but Vince isn't in it as much as you'd hope. This documentary, it's not just like him responding to each and everything. It's him just sort of giving his narrative generic answers. We won't really actually know the truth. So now there's a compilation of everybody saying Vince will not sell, he never sells. He no-sold everything. Paul Heyman pipes in and says, selling is the art of showing your emotion on your face. AEW wrestlers. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to do So Bischoff talks about how he was just gnawing and biting and trying to provoke Vince because everybody told him he wouldn't sell it. And so that just encouraged Bischoff more. And they threw the title in the trash. We all know, but it's just funny seeing Vince laugh. And he's like, you know, what are you guys going to do to us next? Which is true. And it's crazy how he did no sell it, except for like the Huckster stuff and all that, which was super hack and cringe. But I don't know. He had Vince on his back foot, that's for sure. And it's awesome seeing seeing Ted Turner react to the huckster like he's watching his own Billionaire Ted sketches back then and he's laughing at them. He gets a kick out of them. That's amazing, dude. Ted Turner's a fucking legend. So this Kate or Kay Koplovic girl who's being interviewed, she was the head of like the USA Network or whatever that WWE still has a great relationship with to this day. She's stoned out of her tree during these interviews, for sure, allegedly. In Minecraft, she says that USA were the ones that told them to stop poking back at WCW, which is crazy because we've never really heard that. And it was USA who was like, yo, we're friendly with Ted, like we're friendly competitors, stop making fun of him and stuff like that. So that's incredible. That's not being talked about or clipped up on social media enough. So something else very interesting that nobody's really talking about, and I'm not sure if Bruce Pritchard said this on his podcast before at any point, but he's saying in hindsight he knew Razor and Diesel, that's when they were going to leave for WCW because they wouldn't participate in Billionaire Ted sketches. In hindsight, he's like, yeah, that's why they wouldn't do that, because they were going over to WCW. Now, obviously, WCW was doing some contract tampering stuff back then, and all's fair in love and war in the wrestling business, I suppose. And Vince, always, to give him credit again for something else here, Vince understood why Nash and Hall went to WCW. He's like, I had long conversations with them, and they just had to do what was best for their families paycheck-wise, and he's never held that against anybody, which is very interesting about the man, you know? He does like to have control over things, and he doesn't like competition, but he's not going to hold a grudge over someone doing what's best for their family and protecting their business. He respects it. So then they talk about the Clique, and they did Sean Waltman dirty because they did not include him. Like Triple H listed the people, and obviously because they're going to show the curtain call moment, but why wouldn't they also include Sean Waltman? To me, that's a little crazy. Triple H just lists himself, Shawn Michaels, Diesel, and Razor, and no Sean Waltman. Also, it's funny because I think people in the Clique were like, yeah, Just Incredible was in the Clique or something too, but nobody really acknowledges that much. But yeah, they completely shunned X-Pac there. That's kind of weird. They talk about the curtain call. We all know. Well, they are giving us a bit of juice there with the curtain call, so Pritchard just buries it, which is hilarious. And then Stephanie McMahon, little does she know she's going to marry Triple H one day, but she's like, I'm in the crowd at the Garden, and I'm thinking to myself, my dad's going to be so mad. What are they doing? That's amazing. What a gem Stephanie is. And then Undertaker was like, yeah, I wasn't there, but I got some thoughts on that. And they're like, what'd you think? He goes, yeah, I didn't like it. And they start laughing. And Bret Hart flat out goes, that's the day wrestling died. They killed it that day. Hip-hop been dead. It's over. Bret Hart just called it. The GOAT just called it right there. That's the day wrestling died right there. And Vince is just like, it's cool to hear his perspective of what he was thinking on the curtain call. So yeah, like basically he backs up HBK and was like, if it's important to you, go out there and do it. And then he goes, yeah, pal, they came back and people were hot. But Vince takes some accountability, you know? He's like, dude, I didn't know how to feel. Because HBK's like, it was an innocent act. We didn't realize. We thought everybody knew by then. And so Vince is like, I mean, it happened under my watch. I didn't let it happen again. He's like, was it my bad? I mean, was I talked into it? I don't know. So at least he's thought about it, or at least is acting like he's thought about it. How crazy is it too that Triple H got punished for the curtain call worse than anybody, and then he married Stephanie one day and now runs WWE, man? Can't make that up. That's the ultimate revenge story right there. And so Triple H says some compelling stuff, dude. This is the juice I come for to watch this. Triple H goes, I said to Vince, you know, the world's changing. We're going to have to change with it. That moment got the biggest reaction that night. It was real. And Vince said, yeah, the world's changing, but it ain't right now. And you're going to have to eat shit and learn to like the taste of it. Damn, at least he was upfront about it. So Hall and Nash go to WCW. Vince sues them for using their IP. Eric Bischoff calls Vince out for whining like a bitch. Oh, big bad billionaire Ted's trying to put us out of business. That's funny. Vince is like, oh, they're raiding our talent, pal. That's what he did to the entire territories and destroyed the territories. So they actually question Vince on this and say, one thing that you said was Ted Turner did predatory practices and you did the exact same thing. And it just shows you, man, these people. Not to call Vince, I don't know what he's like. Is he a sociopath or I have no idea. I don't know him. But it's funny how he also can pick and choose when he's just, oh, this is America, pal. That's what you do. It's America, free market. And then when he wants to play victim. Now, here is the thing, though. I will defend Vince in this. IP, like the character Razor Ramon, the character Diesel, I get it when guys were like Greg the Hammer Valentine, and I get it. They were their own guys, though, who went around the territories. If you had a gimmick, like I get it, Vince bought Kamala and all of these other gimmicks, but after he ushered it in, it's been like a decade later or so, and he's ushered in this new era and the intellectual property, and Hulk Hogan's already fought with Marvel over the Hulk and all of these things, and wrestling's mainstream. You gotta give it to Vince, like, yeah, like the characters themselves, I get how that's his IP, but for him to cry victim about it is hilarious when he did the exact same thing to a T. I get how the time changed, though, like a decade or 20 years later, to where the way business is handled when it comes to the IP of what a wrestler is called and things like that dramatically shifted, so that's not being talked about. And thankfully the producers challenge him. This is the most compelling part of the documentary so far, I must say, 3 episodes in and well over halfway into the episode, where the producers finally challenge him and are like, we get a moment where Vince is getting called on his shit and he's saying, well, Ted Turner was predatory. He wanted to hurt his competition. It's not the same as what I did in the territories. My mission was never to hurt anybody. It was just to compete. And then this guy goes, well, don't you think what WCW is doing is competition? And Vince is like, no. And it's just straight delusion. So Vince goes on this like narcissistic rant about how what I say is different than what I actually think. You know, I'm this wacky dude. Am I in kayfabe right now? Basically, it's like that. It's like, am I Mr. McMahon or am I Vince right now? And he's like, yeah, you might think it's hypocritical of me to say that, but what I say isn't what I think, or etc. I don't know, man. This stuff is getting juicy here with delusion. And Vince says, as a businessman, sometimes you gotta put things out there that aren't really how you feel, and you control thought process when you do that. That is what entertainment sort of is controlling thought process, if you really think about it, just in general, music, everything. That's what these ultra billionaire crazy dudes, now think about it, the people who run everything. All the black helicopters, we're gonna get conspiratorial here on the Vince review, but all these uber billionaires who own all the media companies and everything like that in the world, they understand that too. YouTube, love you. So they talk about the third man, Bash at the Beach, and that's what really turned the corner for WCW numbers-wise when Hulk turned heel and they started the New World Order. We all know the story. Monster heat, Hogan lays the leg, Cody Rhodes is here saying, dude, I was there, and that's when I learned about there being too much heat. Trash is hitting the ring, that fan hit the ring, and Scott Hall stomps him. Insane bananasness. Glorious times in the history of pro wrestling. So it's interesting because we finally get Vince's thoughts, like all these years later, on what did he think when Hulk Hogan joined the NWO, which is why this stuff is important. A lot of people are like, well, we know all this. Yeah, but you know all this, but you don't know what Vince thought about any of this. That's the thing, you TikTok tweet brain dummies. But anyways, Vince McMahon gets asked, like when they turned him heel, is that something you wanted to do? And he goes, no, me and Hulk Hogan, or Terry, he might have even called him, always believed that we should keep Hulk Hogan a babyface. But it's funny because Hulk Hogan does all these interviews now where he's like, yeah, brother, and I said, Jack, I should have went heel on Ultimate Warrior and called myself Triple H, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, and I would have been Triple H, and all that stuff, and he just always has this spin on it. Whether Vince is kayfabe or not, who knows? They've been on the same page, seemingly, Hulk and Vince, this whole time. But here, unless Hulk backtracks now and tells a different story, which he's done in the past, Vince, not to bury the Hulkster, but Vince was like, no, we never wanted to turn him heel. We always talked about keeping him babyface forever. So that's wild. Another Hulk Hogan lie, which is in the books, which most people probably thought because of the Triple H part, but there you go, confirmed by Vince's chicken lips, to say the least. And so Hogan spits that fiery promo, and he's like, nobody was telling me what to say, that was me. And he's like, you know, of course, the famous promo, I got bigger than the whole organization, Jack. Hulk Hogan is da-da-da-da-da. I was up north, I made the stars, I made everybody money. And Vince is saying here, yo, I wanted to show Vince, like, it wasn't just one guy who did all this. And Vince was like, yeah, he turned heel very well. That's all he really has to say. But then Bruce Pritchard's like, dude, Vince took that very personal, but Vince just no-sold it on the documentary. But the NWO takes off. It's the biggest, most popular thing ever, etc., etc. WCW, NWO, Wolfpack. We know the story. So Eric Bischoff joins the NWO, and they're taking off. They're smashing WWE for 83 weeks. I think, too, they won, like, more than 83 weeks, but it was 83 where they won straight. But I think they won, like, 124, pal, or something like that. that during that time. Eric Bischoff becomes part of the NWO. It's kind of funny seeing Hulk Hogan hugging him and being like, I would do anything for this man, and he's going hard on Vince. Vince is sitting there saying in the interview, he's like, dude, I just didn't even think we'd be able to stay in business. He's like, it's a war, and I'm like, I don't even think we're going to be able to keep this thing afloat, dude. We're up against a billionaire. And Vince would no-sell Eric Bischoff. Eric Bischoff, much like Tony Khan, wanted Vince to acknowledge him really, really badly. So they ask Vince, like, when were you made aware of Eric Bischoff? Do you remember the first time you heard about Eric Bischoff? And he goes, well, actually, you know, and he kind of thinks about it and goes back and forth on his words a bit, and he goes, well, I realized after that he did audition for WWE as a television announcer, and he didn't get the job. And then they ask him, did you regret not hiring him? And Vince is just like, well, no. But he's like, I don't regret anything in my life, which is, okay, there you go. He said it. I bet you deep down he's like, damn, I should have hired that announcer way back in the day, and I would have had him over here. But nah, he ended up owning WCW in the end, so he's happy. And then they get into the Montreal Screwjob. Of course, they preface it by breaking down how Vince went to Calgary and said to Bret Hart, hey man, I want to sign you up for 20 years so you never go over there. Like, we're betting on you to be our guy. And they're scooping up all of our talent, and basically Vince is desperate and like, dude, I need you on a 20-year deal to just be our guy, the face of WWE forever. You cannot go there. And a very interesting point here, a very interesting note, is that Vince sort of, as he's explaining this in the documentary, he starts reflecting to himself and speaking to himself in hindsight like, no, Vince, you idiot. You didn't need Bret, but he's so desperate. I'm like, oh, I need to keep Bret. If he goes, I'll be humiliated. But then Vince is telling himself now, like, no, you idiot. You can just create new stars. Don't worry about that. They're just doing everything old WWE stuff. We can create stars, which if you look now, what does WWE do? They create new stars. Again, what does AEW do? They fucking take old WWE stars, and that's what Vince was saying they were doing in WCW, and they pretty much were. That's what the NWO was, basically. And he was so desperate that in hindsight, he's beating himself up like, no, I could have just made new stars. I didn't need Bret, but like, I was so desperate I needed Bret. Very, very cool to hear Vince say things like this. And I know it's been covered to death, but it's so fascinating how Vince realizes like, oh shit, it's not, I can't even afford to pay him what I'm paying him. We're dying. I can't afford to keep pushing him as the top guy. And so I don't want to fuck him because I just panicked and offered him a $20 million 20-year deal. And now I'm backtracking on it not long after, probably after HBK and these guys were like, well, why the fuck didn't you give us that deal or whatever, Shawn Michaels like, dude, you could have given me that deal. I'd have signed with you for 20 years or whatever. Like, no, Bret's not your guy. Or maybe Vince saw it like, oh shit, HBK or like this new attitude direction or whatever. I don't know what he saw, but he got cold feet, and I know it's been covered everywhere. But think about how wild that is, that he's like, dude, it's not working. I gotta pivot. Look, man, I gotta back out. Here's all the loopholes in your contract. Use these and go negotiate against me with WCW. So he flies to his house. Pal, you can't leave. 20 years, please. I'm desperate. And then a few months later, whatever it is, a year later, I'm not sure the timeline, but, oh, pal, listen, actually go to WCW. Actually, fuck you. I want you to go there, and I'll screw you out of this match. In kayfabe, of course. And Shane McMahon, again. So the reason I'm bringing it up is because Shane McMahon was recently photographed with the Young Bucks, and then we saw a secret meeting with Tony Khan, and I know this isn't my podcast, but he's in this doc, and he's talking again about loyalty, and that's all I want to point out is that he's like, look, my dad showed him the loopholes in the contract, said go get all the money in the world from WCW. I'm so sorry I fucked around with this stupid idea I came up with. All I expect is drop the title to who I tell you to and when I tell you to. Bret wouldn't do that. Shane is like, dude, that's disloyal. Shane still feels a way about it. I don't think we see him in AEW, but to make this about the Mr. McMahon doc and the Montreal Screwjob, which we all know the story to, again, it's interesting to hear Shane finally talk about it, Vince finally talk about it, and although Bret is the GOAT, I do agree, like, he should have just dropped that belt unless the conspiracy theories are true that the Screwjob was a work to this day. Here's my conspiracy theory. Think about the Montreal Screwjob like this, okay? And I don't know if anybody else has ever came up with this theory, but Bret was going to WCW, he negotiated maximum money, and he came up with this plan with Vince, like, look, they are telling me if I can get the title over there, I sign for this much. So I get them to ink the deal before I drop the belt, and I have them think over in WCW that I'm going to show up with the WWE title. But we do this whole screw job, whole crazy curtain call type shit anyways, because Shawn Michaels is already doing shit shit like that. And I go to WCW and then I'm already inked down for this certain amount of money. And then they're fucked because the belt doesn't come with me. But it's too little too late and they'll understand because it's the craziest thing that's ever fucking happened in wrestling history. And then Bret goes to WCW and he just talks about El Dandy and fucking has boo-boo face and buries everybody and then retires after Goldberg kicks him in the head. All I'm saying, that's my conspiracy theory. If it was like a double work or whatever you want to call it, or the simplest answer is probably true, it probably was just a screw job because we've seen that Vince did it before to Wendy Richter. And it's happened before Vince's time. It's hilarious, and not to laugh at Bret because he's really pissed and he's serious and he's the GOAT, but he's sitting there like, man, he's talking about sunny days, me banging Sunny when I have a wife, you're messing with my family, it's real to me. Like I was gonna punch Sean almost on a daily basis. And then they go, Vince, what did you think about all this? And he goes, well, it made for really great television. That's all he has to say. He just no-sells everything. It's hilarious. So through all the Montreal Screwjob stuff that we've heard over the years, I don't know if we've ever heard this ever. So we do get a bomb dropped in this documentary about the Montreal Screwjob, an episode where I was like, you know, we pretty much know all of this. We squeezed a little juice out of it. Triple H drops a bomb and goes, there's a phone call that happens between Vince, me, and Shawn Michaels, and he says, Bret's not going to drop the belt, and I'm the first one to throw it out there, so everybody says, who came up with the screw job? Vince Russo wants to say it's him. Cornette's like, well, I'm the one who put it together, and I said it, and his eyes lit up, or whatever the stories are, right? And Triple H is like, no, on that three-way call, Vince, Shawn, and me, they tell Shawn he doesn't want to do the job, and I'm sitting there going, well, fuck him. Like, if he doesn't want to do it for him. So there you go, Triple H, and if you ever watch Wrestling with Shadows, when Triple H is confronted, like, did you know? He's like, I swear we didn't know. And it's like, dude, he seems really guilty. So that's crazy if that's true, that Triple H, who now runs WWE, and Bret Hart was just on Raw recently as well, folks. And he's, they're all hugs and they love each other. But in this doc, he goes, well, I was the first one to go, fuck him. Screw him, do it for him. So that's crazy. And he actually says fuck him. And then HBK kind of peels back the curtain, and we know, but he's getting more emotional than I think we've ever seen him before. But he's like, Vince was pretty much my dad. I knew him since in like my 20s. I knew him longer than I knew my own dad. I'm loyal to him. I get emotional about it because like I put him through a lot. And yeah, they do sort of have that relationship. Shawn just says, dude, he just has to look at me and say, Shawn, this is what I want, and I'm going to do it. And there's a lot of guys like that. But it's kind of fucked up. Bret's like, yeah, they agree to do a schmoz, and what a schmoz is basically a bunch of BS happens, and then there's no winner. No one wins or loses. And he goes, that works for me. Like, come on now, man. Just drop the belt. He didn't want to lose in Montreal. It's so silly. It's given back to the business, man. And I love Bret, but that's crazy. And Bruce Pritchard cops to that same story as well. I believe that's true. I believe not a lot of people knew what was up, but obviously the ref did, and he ran scared for his life immediately. And then Bret Hart's like, dude, I'll fight Shawn Michaels for real to the death anytime. But Vince cops to it. He's like, I'm yelling at the timekeeper, ring the bell, ring the bell, ring the fucking. Then the guy rings it, and Earl Hebner's clearly like pointing, and he wants to make it seem like a shoot or like he wouldn't know, but he yells for the bell really quickly. And oh man, what a mess. What an ugly situation to put everyone in. And then Shawn Michaels the whole time yelling at Vince, like, what the fuck? And he's lucky that Bret didn't just start like beating the shit out of him right there. He definitely could have, but notice how Shawn Michaels grabs the belts and like runs out of the building basically too, like even though he allegedly didn't know what was going on, but now all these days later he's like, no, I was acting. So you see him in the ring yelling like, what happened and stuff. So he's not really mad. He's lying to Bret there. He grabs the belt, he walks out, but notice when he walks through the entranceway, he like holds the belt up quick and does a pose like, yeah, it's mine now kind of thing. And damn, dude, it's crazy how back then I think Shawn and them were way more in on it than, you know, even HBK. Well, obviously he said Vince asked me to do it and I did it. Dude, Vince no-sells everything and he puts everything over. He's like, yeah, he spit in my eye, directly in my eye, and I was pissed. It was disgusting, but mostly I was thinking, oh, how did he do that? That's literally what he says. And then Bret goes backstage after he's screwed. He's like, I gave my whole life to Vince. He just screwed me. It's insane. On the Wrestling with Shadows, Shawn, you know about that? No idea. Hand to fucking God, man. man. Oh, just such a liar. And then, like, on the Wrestling with Shadows as well, like I brought it up before, Julie Hart is, and they're showing it in this doc where she's like, Hunter, this is fucked up what they did. This is messed up. And Hunter's like, I swear we knew nothing. And Triple H is flat out, he's like, dude, no, we were told, sworn up and down, like, you do not tell anybody, no matter what. This was a Vince McMahon call. You do not let anyone know that you knew. So that's crazy. They're just unveiling all that now. I mean, we kind of knew that. You got to kind of assume that. But think about my conspiracy from before. Bret did write WCW right on their camera, like right on screen on their television, and didn't do shit about it. And they allowed that to happen too. But obviously Vince wasn't on a headset or anything, you know, telling them not to leave that on the screen. But ultimately, though, it is crazy they're full on just admitting that part, especially Triple H in the position he's in. And again, I'll give it to Vince. At least he took it on the chin, literally, because Bret Hart knocks him out. Now, I'm not saying like any of this is good by any means, but at least he was like, no, put all the heat on me. This is me no matter what. And that is a man who stands on business, at least, you know, to say the least, man. That's standing on your business. And I mean, just to further that, man, he comes in the locker room, he says, everyone out, and he even says it on this doc. He's like, I owed him something. Least he can do is fucking punch me in the face and knock me the fuck out, dude. You know? And it did create the Mr. McMahon character from all of this, so at least on screen. It seems as though he's Mr. McMahon all the time behind the scenes. It's so funny because Bret's like, yo, the stories are just bullshit. You know, we tied up like a wrestling match. He's like, we got like a collar and elbow tie up, and then I knocked him. And Vince is like, dude, he just whooped my ass, hit me right in the temple. Didn't Vince have a black eye? And then I think I've heard Bret tell a story where he uppercuts him and he goes flying in the air. Man, I'm telling you, there's some conspiracy theory elements to this. They did some stuff to do like a double turn the way they did with Austin and Bret. You know what I mean? They did that with Vince and Bret and then sent Bret to WCW. Vince is like, that's the Montreal Screwjob, as it's come to be known. And it's hilarious hearing him say the Montreal Screwjob. It's hilarious hearing Triple H even say those words. Vince says the Montreal Screwjob, and it's hilarious even hearing him acknowledge it. And so episode 3 ends without any subtitles at the end, with any updates on allegations or settlements or court hearings or anything like that. And it just simply ends with a highlight of what's to come in the last 3 episodes, which is showcasing, you know, Vince McMahon as this wild on-screen character who does all of this crazy stuff. And I more or less know what to expect, I feel like, from the rest of this documentary. But I'm enjoying it so far. It's been a compelling watch. I'll definitely want to watch it again for sure, because like I said, I'm a mark like that. And yeah, millions of people are seeing this for the first time. I saw some people saying, oh, it's not even in the top 10. Well, it's in the top 10 in Canada. That's all I can say. So yeah, I enjoyed this episode. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe and tune in for part 4.